Hey everybody, Will with Lost Visions Performance. Today we're going to be installing a CTS Turbo downpipe on this 2015 Audi S3. This one is also very similar to the Volkswagen Golf R. So quite a bit to go on this one. Definitely want to let the car cool down a little bit. It is nice and hot. So while we're doing that, waiting for it to cool down, we will get it all up on the lift, start checking it out on everything we need to do, start spraying all of our hardware with some penetrating oil. Alright, so here's a quick shot of the CTS Turbo downpipe setup. Very, very nice looking kit. This was all provided by the customer. Everything. This is their catted kit. I believe they offer a catted and a non-catted one. So this one is, at least in most states, street legal. Hard to see in the video, but it does look like quite a high flow setup on it. Come with all the necessary clamps, and my very accommodating customer also gave us a new Vband clamp for the turbo side. So generally those are reusable, but it's always good to make sure you have one, because if it breaks, you're kind of screwed. So as long as this fits as nice as it looks, you should make for a very nice install. Right now we got the car up on the lift. Our back slip joint here, we went ahead and sprayed those with some penetrating oil, and then just get an overall feel for what we're going to have to go through on removing this downpipe setup. We'll have to remove this plastic shield here, got a couple torque screws and a couple little plastic pop buttons. That's not hard. We'll remove this bracket here, like two 13 or 14 millimeter bolts, and you're supposed to disconnect the drive shaft and the engine torque mount, mostly engine torque mount, to be able to slide the drive shaft over. So we're gonna go ahead and lower this back down, start disconnecting the O2 sensor setup, undoing the Vband clamp at the turbo, and also the bracket for it. It's right at the main cat there. Pretty hard to see. If you look right above the CV axle, you can see one of the nuts holding the bracket. The new downpipe setup does not utilize that bracket setup. Got the O2 sensor removed. First started off by unplugging it. Comes over here to a small connector. This kind of turns sideways and locks into this holder right there for the plug. And you got a couple of these little wire holders to hold it in. This one does kind of snap close with teeth, but if you real gently pry up on that and push down, and it'll open up. You can pull the wiring out of that. I just went ahead and unplugged that one so we didn't have to worry about twisting the wires as we try to pull it out of there and have to fight it more, because it's already hard to get to back there. You really can't see it, you can just feel it. Used this setup to actually get in there and remove it. It's a little bit tight, but if you work around a little bit, use a O2 socket and a somewhat short 3/8 ratchet, you can take care of it. Hopefully yours isn't seized in there. This one came out pretty easily. And then we also undid all the brackets for the upward portion of the downpipe. There's a total of 3 13 millimeter nuts you take off. There's 2 studs that go down there, and then there's another one that goes directly behind the downpipe, right underneath. You can't see it, but you can feel it get in there. It's used a 3/8 ratchet and a deep 13 millimeter socket. You do have to have the O2 sensor out to be able to access it properly. Not worried about rounding that off. So we undid those, obviously undid our Vband clamp up here, and now we are going to head back underneath the vehicle and continue working under there. All right, all kinds of progress under here. So once you have everything unbolted up top there, and you come down here, undo your 2 13 millimeter bolts to hold this bracket here, and then loosen up your joint clamp there. Those are also 2 13 millimeters. And then that one's able to slide freely to actually let the pipe out. But we have all that undone. Our next step was to remove the bolts from the drive shaft flange up there. Those are 10 millimeter 12-point bolts. You do have to rotate the drive shaft to get all of them out, obviously. I just turned on the ignition without starting the car, so hit the start button without pushing the brake, and then shifted the car into drive. Obviously, like I said, it is not running. And then by turning the front wheels by hand, that will turn around in there so you can get to all three of them rotating it. So did that, long extension, impact, pop those out. Next I have to undo this lower torque mount, and then we should be able to rock the whole drivetrain forward a little bit and make it a little easier to get that drive shaft actually off of there and just slid over towards the driver's side, and we should have more room to be able to work on getting the downpipe actually out of the car. Alright, factory downpipe and cats are officially removed. So we have our drive shaft there that we did pry over to the side a little bit. So you can see there's that nub that sticks out on the drive flange, and that is why it's so important to have to undo the torque mount so you can rock the motor a little bit. And you still got to get a pry bar up in there between the drive biscuit and the drive flange there to be able to pry it out enough to get that nub out of the way. I also did unbolt at the carrier bearings there, or the carrier bearing, its mounts there, but there was still not enough room. So actually had to remove the bolts to let the subframe down. So with the center mount disconnected, that's not a problem there. And then you have a bracket with a large bolt that comes up right through here and goes back to there. So there's two 16mm bolts and an 18mm bolt on each side, and then two more 18mm bolts, one on each side, straight up through here. You do want to make sure that you have the subframe supported when you let those out. It'll only come down so far, but you don't want to put a lot of stress on everything. You got your steering shaft and everything like that. We also disconnected the ride height sensors on each side to give it a little more free play. But got that down with some horsing it around, able to remove this. Alright, so we have the new front portion of the downpipe sitting in the car. Right now it's sitting there on the mounting bracket that originally attaches on here. The two rubber hangers and the two 13mm bolts that go into the subframe. So we have those bolts loosely in there, just holding it up in here. That way we can come up here and reposition it, get our new Vband clamp on there. The Vband clamps on these and the seal that goes in here, this gasket, or the fire ring as some refer it to, is actually reusable in most instances. But our customer did provide new seal and a new clamp, so we will use those. So we will get this out of here. Usually use like a flat blade screwdriver and hit it and be able to knock it out of there and everything. And then we can get this positioned up on there and get our new clamp on. When you're doing anything exhaust wise, especially with one as many pieces as this is, you don't want to go through and tighten anything until you're fully done with the install. So we'll get our V-band clamp up on here with the new gasket, obviously. We'll just get it on there where it's able to hold it but not tightened, and we will work on getting the rest of the pieces of the exhaust all fitted. That way, in case anything needs to move around a little bit or this needs to swing forward or back a little bit, we can do that. Once everything is set to where we want, then we'll tighten it all down. Alright, so the downpipe is loosely mounted. We did replace our fire ring gasket and have the new V-band clamp on there. Like I said, it is still loose, just enough to hold it in proper position. And now we will go back under the car and continue fitting the rest of the exhaust piping. Alright, at least for the underneath section, the downpipe setup is fully installed. Looks pretty good. It fits decent. The upper portion, that part's great. Back here, it could use a little bit of work. Wants to sit real hard against this side right here. I had to lightly massage some of the heat shielding there to give us a little bit more room. And then on this bracket here with your two 13mm bolts, there's not a whole lot of play in there, but I did pry the bracket as far as it would over that way before tightening it down, just to give us a little bit more room. If you were to slot the holes in that, it might help a tiny bit, but you can only go so far with that portion of it. And then when we tightened down our Torca clamp back here, I did make sure to hold the exhaust as far over as I could, tightening it down. That way it'll keep some pressure on the exhaust system, trying to pull it that way. So with that, and then having to leave this bend turned down just a tiny bit, we were able to get enough clearance there. So hopefully under acceleration, it should not be touching that and making all kinds of rattles against the floorboard, because I don't think that'll make our customer too pleased. But overall, very nice setup. They give you all the clamps and everything, and they do give a adapter or reducer to go from the 3-inch to the at least factory size 2.5-inch pipe. This one's got a resonator delete in there already. But anyways, so they give you all that. All these clamps, those are all 15 millimeter. I just hammered those down with the 3/8 impact just until they're nice and tight. Got to put a pretty good amount of squeeze on there. Make sure we don't get any exhaust leaks. So now we are back up to going up top after we put our little shield back on down here. And we'll go up top and do the O2 sensor and tighten up our V-band. And all right, we got our V-band clamp up here, all nice and tight. Anytime you're working with the V-band, always make sure that it is all centered properly. Make sure your flanges are all lining up right. On these setups, the factory ones, they always sit real nicely. They have a nice little lip so that they actually form together. Some of the aftermarket ones, it's pretty difficult when they're both flat flange surfaces. Anyways, these go on very nice. New gasket in there, new clamp, everything's lined up. Got that all torqued down. Got our O2 sensor reinstalled. Did put a little bit of anti-seize on the threads. That way, when it has to come out again next time, it'll be a little nicer. Got our wire ran back up. Got our connector plugged back in over here. Got them all put back in all the little snaps. That one's snapped now. These ones are just little healthy ones. But that is it for the downpipe install. So when you're doing this, it's quite a bit of work on these, really it is. Not impossible, not overly difficult, but just a lot of parts to have to move and remove and everything. Letting the subframe down, being careful with that, having to move the drive shaft, having to be able to get it in the spot where you can actually rotate it to do the drive shaft. If you're doing it on the ground, it'd be pretty difficult. Not impossible, but definitely difficult. On a lift, if it's your first time doing it, figure on about 3, maybe 4 hours to get it finished up. Overall fitment was pretty good. Had to mess with it a little bit, but it fit pretty nice. Just always be really careful with stuff like this. There's a lot of things we touched on this car. Go through, check everything you've done. We've done all kinds of stuff with the suspension, to the drive shaft, to all the exhaust system. Make sure all your connectors are plugged back in. Double check everything. Save yourself some time later. Always be safe with the exhaust stuff. Make sure it's not touching against anything, because that can cause a lot of damage or just be really irritating. Overall, pretty good install, so I'm pretty happy with this one. If there's anything we didn't cover in this that you have any questions or comments about, please put them there in the comment section and we'll get back to you quickly as possible. I think that's it, so thanks for watching, and happy modding. Hey guys, Will with LV Performance. Today we're going to be installing Hey everybody, Will with Lost Visions Performance. Today we're going to be installing